Between the growing debate on benefits of fiction versus non-fiction, memoirs or autobiographies or biographies happen to be the clear winners. With great storytelling, these kind of books give you an opportunity to learn and observe someone else's life. They contain stories and lessons you won't find elsewhere. This is why I love memoirs and I believe they are an absolute must read. But hey, which ones? Let me tell you about an interesting memoir that I read recently and what I think about it, and if it's something that you should pick up too. First of all, who could this appeal to? Should you even continue watching this review? Well, if you are someone who's interested in reading about an immigrant story, or a badminton player, or a highly successful solicitor in England, you need to keep watching this video. Thanks so much to the publishers of this book for reaching out and giving me an opportunity to read this book and bring it to my audience. Now, let's dive into this memoir of Philip George. Who is he? He's a person who was born in Malaysia. His parents were immigrants from Kerala, so that's where his Indian connection lies. After being born in Malaysia and spending his early years there, Philip does keep his Indian connection intact by making some trips to India to meet his family, who later moved back to India. After Malaysia, Philip immigrated to London. That's where you hear about his story as a Malay immigrant with his roots in India. From enrolling into a course his father didn't approve much of to becoming a highly successful solicitor, that's Philip's life achievements. But amidst everything his life has been about, it has really been about two big things: his travel bug, he loves to travel, and most importantly, sports. Philip played international level badminton and was deeply interested in not only playing but also attending the big games during his time. That's Philip for you. In my opinion, it's really a memoir that will appeal to anyone interested in migrating to a different country or badminton, or really all of it. As we move further into the review, I'll tell you more about what things appealed to me and what did not. However, there's one more person who I need to name before we get to that: Geetha K. She's the person who has actually written this memoir recounting Philip's life until now, and what a fabulous job she has done. I think the book wouldn't be half as good as it is right now if not for that writing and craft of storytelling that Geetha has put into it. She has made every anecdote and even just the chronological passing of time in Philip's life super interesting. The book definitely scores well on the subject of powerful and polished writing. Speaking more of the book, I would like to divide the discussion about it into 5 sections. My favorite out of all 5 has really been the first half of the book, where the author speaks of his childhood and life in Malaysia. There are so many aspects of it that I loved. First of all, just reading about his life in that country. I've never read a book set in Malaysia, so this is the first time I was being introduced to life in the country through a book. And this time was really decades ago, and one unique part of this memoir is how world scale and important political and sports events have been woven into the story. The book actually really starts from 1957. This was the time when Malaysia got its independence. It was interesting to read about the time of independence in another country, and this being told from the author's point of view was really interesting. It also builds that much needed introduction to understand Philip's relationship with his father and family in general. The author's relationship with his father wasn't the best. His father's expectations from his firstborn were too different as compared to Philip's own interests and capabilities. There simply wasn't anything I could do besides getting good grades in school to please my father. Philip wasn't so good at school, but was really good at badminton and other sports. His father never liked that about him, being a traditional Indian parent who valued grades above everything else. This part is also where the feel of the book is the most atmospheric. That's where you appreciate Geetha for her great writing and Philip for letting you into such detail that you can try and feel the vibe of where he lived and spent his childhood afternoons. As he speaks of Malaysia and then England, the author openly talks of the class gap as well as the racism he faces throughout his life and how he dealt with it. Spoiler alert, as he becomes a solicitor, he does kind of make a habit of suing people over such stuff. Just my opinion, But reading about it all, you understand When in Malaysia, his father started off as a manual laborer and then grew up the ranks. But as a laborer, his children faced certain episodes and rules that hit that class cap like a slap on their faces. And of course, when Philip moves to England, racism was a common thing he had to face. I could personally relate to it, having lived the immigrant life myself for a couple of years now. And honestly, I wish there were more stories and discussions around this than you find today in India's media. As Philip moved to England, you learn about his fight and the immigrant struggle. From having his flight delayed and fighting to get to the country on his very first trip to England, to having his relatives not even show up to pick him up. You feel all those lows of his life. It's a lens you can't see through often enough. It's a lens you must look into if you have ever thought about leaving your own country and moving elsewhere. One great lesson that I learned from Philip's story was how being exceptional at something other than your exact profession can take you places. Being a badminton player, and more importantly, being a person who prioritized this even through his hard days, gave him an edge. It got him the connections and bonding he needed to survive in that white country that didn't have enough people of color at that time. It's also the reason why he met Joffrey, a person who becomes a father like figure to Philip and who really plays a big part in the author's life. I mean, in Philippe's life, who is one of the authors of this book. So, yes, a lot of subtle but deep meaning life lessons are waiting for you in this book. As he's moving forward with his life in England, the author does maintain the relationships back home. Honestly speaking, as I read these parts, I just felt and didn't really like the painful distance and gap that enters in your relationships as you move far away. At times, the author's tone just felt so aloof when speaking of his siblings and even his home. But when your life is just so different and distant, that's inevitable. It is still so good to see how Philip was able to maintain all those relationships despite the challenges throughout his life. In this memoir, you not only get to see Philip's transition from being a mental nurse to solicitor, but also get to read about some of his crucial cases. You can read about the nuances and the little things he did to become more endearing to his clients and to survive in the world where people didn't expect to see a person of his color acting as their solicitor. And lastly, but most importantly, the book is about sports and how it played a major role in getting Philippe to where he is today. From being a boy whose father didn't even approve of his plays to someone who benefited heavily from the sports he played in his personal and professional career, it's a story that feels like a must read. I'm not a huge sports fan, so for me, it was quite an unknown territory and I didn't expect to like it much. But you know what? When I was about 60% done with the book, my partner just randomly asked me if the book was even good. I was taking an abnormally long time to go through it. Was I struggling? The truth is, I was just enjoying this book so much. Throughout the book, I was shocked at how much I liked it myself. Right from the author's days in Malaysia, I was hooked and I experienced sheer joy while reading this book. So, yes, that's what I think about Racket Boy by Philippe George and Geetha K. If you're looking for a memoir that comes from heart, tells you of a migrant story and struggle to belong somewhere, tells you of a boy who grows up to be someone he never dreamed of, who made mistakes and isn't perfect, pick up Racket Boy. I'm sure you won't regret reading such an in depth, honest, and beautiful memoir. Overall, I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really hope you enjoyed watching this book review video. And if you felt interested in this book, you can check out the link to buy this book down below in the description. So do check it out. And thanks so much for watching this video. This is Manpi signing off. I'll be back with another video very soon.